Marcus Blackwood adjusted his tie as he stepped through the marble foyer of his Manhattan penthouse, the weight of another grueling board meeting still heavy on his shoulders. The tech mogul had built his empire from nothing, but success had come at a cost. Long hours meant he barely saw his 8-year-old twins, Emma and Ethan, who had been deaf since birth. As he rounded the corner toward the kitchen, expecting the usual quiet that filled his home, he stopped dead in his tracks. There, in the center of his pristine kitchen, was Maria Santos, their housekeeper of 6 months, moving in fluid, expressive gestures that could only be described as dancing. But she wasn't alone. Emma and Ethan were with her, their faces lit up with pure joy as they mimicked her movements, their small hands creating shapes in the air. Marcus had never seen his children so animated, so genuinely happy. Maria was teaching them something, not just dance, but a language of movement that transcended sound. Her weathered hands told stories through sign language, while her body swayed to music only she could hear through the small earbuds she wore. The twins giggled silently, their whole beings vibrating with an energy Marcus had never witnessed in his own home. He pressed himself against the wall, not wanting to interrupt this magical moment, but also struggling with a mix of emotions he couldn't quite identify. When had his children learned to express themselves so freely? When had this stranger become someone who could unlock joy in his children that he, their own father, had never been able to access? The scene before him challenged everything he thought he knew about his family and forced him to confront the distance he had allowed to grow between himself and the two most important people in his world. Marcus cleared his throat, stepping into the kitchen with the authoritative presence that commanded boardrooms across the globe. The dancing stopped immediately. Maria's face flushed red as she quickly pulled out her earbuds and smoothed her uniform, while Emma and Ethan looked between their father and their beloved caretaker with wide, uncertain eyes. "What exactly is going on here?" Marcus asked, his voice carrying the cool professionalism he used in business negotiations. Maria straightened her shoulders, meeting his gaze despite the obvious anxiety flickering in her dark eyes. "Mr. Blackwood, the children were asking about music, and I was showing them how I feel it through vibrations and movement." Her English was careful, accented with the lilting tones of her native Colombia. Marcus watched as Emma tugged on his expensive suit jacket, her small hands forming signs he didn't understand. The frustration of not being able to communicate directly with his own daughter hit him like a physical blow. "She was teaching us about dancing without hearing," Ethan said aloud, his speech slightly different from hearing children but clear and earnest. "Maria says music isn't just sound, it's feeling and movement and light." Marcus looked at his son, surprised by the eloquence and excitement in his voice. When had Ethan become so articulate about abstract concepts? "I can explain everything," Maria said quietly, stepping protectively closer to the twins. "I know this might seem inappropriate, but the children were curious about how people like us experience music and art. I thought it would be educational." The word "us" hung in the air, and Marcus realized with a start that he had never bothered to learn much about Maria beyond her references and work ethic. Here was a woman who shared something fundamental with his children that he, their father, could never fully understand. "You're deaf too," Marcus said, the statement emerging not as a question but as a realization that reframed everything he had just witnessed. Maria nodded slowly, her chin lifting with quiet dignity. "I lost my hearing when I was 12. Meningitis. But I learned that there are many ways to experience the world, Mr. Blackwood." Emma and Ethan moved closer to Maria, their protective instincts activated by the tension in the room. Marcus felt a sharp pang of something, jealousy, regret, as he watched his children instinctively shield someone who understood them in ways he had never tried to. "How long have you been teaching them sign language?" he asked, noticing for the first time the fluid way his children communicated with Maria. "From my first day," she replied honestly. "They were hungry for it. They've been using basic signs and lip reading, but they wanted to learn more expressive communication. Emma especially is very artistic with her signing." Marcus watched his daughter's face light up at the compliment, her hands dancing through a series of signs that Maria translated. "She says she likes how signing feels like painting pictures in the air. The businessman in Marcus wanted to ask why Maria hadn't mentioned her deafness during the hiring process, but the father in him was grappling with a more troubling question. Why hadn't he ever sought out ways to better communicate with his own children? He had hired tutors for everything else, mathematics, French, piano lessons they couldn't hear, but had never considered that their deafness might be not just a challenge to overcome, but a different way of experiencing the world that had its own richness and beauty. "Show me," he said suddenly, surprising everyone in the room, including himself. "Show me what you were teaching them." Maria exchanged glances with Emma and Ethan, who nodded encouragingly. With tentative grace, she moved to the center of the kitchen again, but this time her movements were more deliberate, instructional. "Music has patterns," she explained, placing her hand on the granite countertop. "We feel the vibrations, the rhythm. Watch." She turned on her phone and placed it against the counter, the bass from a gentle song creating subtle tremors that Marcus could actually feel through the stone. Emma and Ethan immediately placed their hands on the surface, their faces concentrating as they felt the pulse of the music. "Now we add movement," Maria continued, her body beginning to sway in time with the vibrations. "Each beat is like a heartbeat. Each melody line is like a river flowing." Her arms moved in fluid arcs, and Marcus found himself mesmerized by the way she transformed invisible sound into visible poetry. The twins joined in, their small bodies interpreting the music through touch and feeling, their faces radiant with concentration and joy. "Your turn, Daddy," Emma signed, and Maria translated with a gentle smile. Marcus felt every muscle in his body tense. He was a man accustomed to control, to competence, to never appearing vulnerable. The idea of moving his body freely, of potentially looking foolish in front of his children and an employee, triggered every instinct to retreat to his office and return to the familiar world of spreadsheets and strategic planning. But something in his daughter's expectant expression, in his son's encouraging nod, in Maria's patient waiting, made him take a tentative step forward. "I don't know how," he admitted, and the words felt foreign in his mouth. When was the last time Marcus Blackwood had admitted he didn't know how to do something? "Everyone starts somewhere," Maria said gently, and Marcus was struck by the kindness in her voice, not the deference he was used to from employees, but genuine compassion. She guided his hand to the countertop, and he felt the subtle vibrations for the first time, realizing that his children experienced music as a physical sensation that traveled through their bodies in ways he had never imagined. "Feel the rhythm first," she instructed, her own hand placed near his on the granite surface. "Don't think about looking right or wrong. Just feel." Marcus closed his eyes, something he never did outside of sleep, and tried to let the vibrations guide him. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, his shoulders began to move. Emma clapped her hands silently, her face glowing with excitement at seeing her usually rigid father soften. Ethan moved closer, placing his small hand on Marcus's arm, sharing the vibrations between them. For the first time in years, Marcus felt connected to his children not through providing for them or making decisions about their education and care, but through shared experience, shared discovery. "Now we add the visual element," Maria continued, her movements becoming more expressive. "In my culture, we believe dance tells stories. What story do you want to tell your children?" The question caught Marcus off guard. What story did he want to tell them? That he loved them? That he was sorry for being absent? That he was proud of them, but didn't know how to show it? That he was terrified of failing them the way his own father had failed him? His movements became more deliberate, his arms reaching toward Emma and Ethan, as if trying to embrace them without words. The twins seemed to understand instinctively, moving closer until the three of them were connected in a slow, awkward, beautiful dance that spoke of love struggling to find expression. As the impromptu dance lesson continued, Marcus found himself studying Maria with new eyes. She moved between English, Spanish, and ASL with fluid ease, creating a rich tapestry of communication that included everyone in the room despite their different languages and abilities. When she helped Ethan adjust his posture, her touch was gentle but confident. When Emma asked a complex question about rhythm patterns, Maria's explanation was sophisticated yet age-appropriate. This was not simply a housekeeper who happened to be deaf. This was an educator, an artist, a person with depths he had never bothered to explore. "Where did you learn to teach like this?" Marcus asked during a pause in the music. Maria's smile was soft but tinged with sadness. "I was a dance instructor in Bogotá before I came to the United States. I worked with deaf children at a special school there. When I lost my job due to budget cuts and had to move here for better opportunities, I thought that part of my life was over." She gestured around the pristine kitchen, so different from a dance studio. "But Emma and Ethan, they reminded me that teaching never really stops. It just finds new places to happen." Marcus felt a wave of shame wash over him. Here was a woman who had given up her career, her country, her language, to work in his home, and instead of seeing her as a person with her own dreams and expertise, he had reduced her to a function, someone who cleaned and cooked and watched his children while he worked. "Why didn't you tell me about your background?" he asked. Maria's expression became guarded. "In my experience, employers prefer housekeepers who are invisible. They don't want someone with opinions about education or child development. They want someone who follows instructions and doesn't complicate things." The words stung because Marcus recognized the truth in them. He had indeed wanted someone invisible, someone who would manage the domestic sphere so he could focus on business without distraction. That evening, after Maria had gone home and the twins were in bed, Marcus found himself in his study staring at his laptop screen without seeing the quarterly reports displayed there. He kept thinking about the joy on his children's faces, the way they had communicated with Maria so effortlessly, the realization that there was an entire world of experience and expression happening in his own home that he had been completely blind to. He pulled up his browser and began searching for information about deaf culture, sign language, and deaf education. What he found challenged many of his assumptions. The deaf community wasn't simply a group of people missing one sense. It was a vibrant culture with its own language, art forms, values, and ways of understanding the world. He watched videos of deaf poets whose signing was so expressive it transcended the need for sound, deaf musicians who created music through visual and tactile elements, deaf dancers who moved with a grace and intentionality that hearing dancers often lacked. He realized that he had been thinking about his children's deafness as a limitation to be managed rather than as a different way of being human that came with its own strengths and perspectives. Around midnight, he found himself looking up Maria Santos online. What he discovered made his shame deepen into something closer to horror. She had been a celebrated dance instructor at the Instituto Nacional para Sordos in Bogotá, with articles written about her innovative methods for teaching dance to deaf children. She had choreographed performances that toured internationally, won awards for her educational techniques, and had been working toward a master's degree in deaf education when economic hardship forced her family to emigrate. And he had hired her to clean toilets and prepare meals, never once asking about her background or qualifications beyond her references as domestic help. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the breakfast table earlier than usual, finding Maria preparing the twins' meal with the same care and attention she brought to everything else. Emma and Ethan were already dressed for school, chattering in sign language about something that made them giggle silently. Marcus watched the easy communication between the three of them and made a decision that surprised even him. "Maria, could we speak privately for a moment?" She looked up with a slightly wary expression he now realized she wore whenever he addressed her directly, the look of someone expecting criticism or dismissal. They moved to the living room while the twins finished their breakfast. "I owe you an apology," Marcus began, the words feeling strange in his mouth. In his business world, apologies were signs of weakness, admissions of liability to be avoided. But this felt different. "I hired you to be a housekeeper, but you've been so much more to Emma and Ethan. You've been the teacher, the cultural bridge, the communication facilitator that I should have been looking for all along." Maria's expression remained carefully neutral. "I've been researching your background," he continued. "I know about your work in Bogotá, your expertise in deaf education. I know I'm probably the last person who should be making this offer, given how I've undervalued your skills, but..." He paused, realizing he was about to make one of the most important business propositions of his life, and it had nothing to do with technology or profit margins. "I want to offer you a different position. Not as a housekeeper, but as Emma and Ethan's primary educational coordinator and deaf culture specialist. The salary would be 4 times what you're making now, with full benefits, educational support if you want to pursue additional credentials, and a budget for creating programs and resources. Maria's careful composure cracked slightly, showing surprise and something that might have been hope. There would be conditions, Marcus continued, seeing the wariness return to Maria's eyes. You would have full authority over the children's cultural and linguistic education. I wouldn't interfere with your methods or question your expertise. But in return, I want you to teach me too. I want to learn sign language, understand deaf culture, and figure out how to be a better father to children whose world I've been excluded from by my own ignorance. Maria was quiet for a long moment, her expressions cycling through surprise, skepticism, and careful consideration. Why? She asked finally. Yesterday, you seemed upset that I was teaching them to dance. Today you're offering me a promotion that most people would think is crazy. What changed? Marcus thought about the question, trying to articulate feelings he barely understood himself. I saw my children happy in a way I've never been able to make them happy. I realized that I've been so focused on providing for them financially and ensuring they get the best medical care and educational opportunities that I never considered they might need something I couldn't buy. Understanding, cultural connection, and a parent who could communicate with them in their own language. He paused, then added more quietly, I also realized that I've been incredibly arrogant. I assumed that because I was successful in business, I knew what was best for my children. But success in the hearing world doesn't automatically translate to understanding the deaf world. They need guides who actually know the territory. Over the following weeks, the Blackwood household transformed dramatically. Maria moved into the guest suite and converted one of the unused rooms into a proper learning space with visual teaching aids, comfortable seating arranged for conversation, and technology designed to support deaf communication. Marcus began taking sign language lessons during his lunch breaks, practicing with online tutorials during his commute, and spending his evenings learning alongside his children rather than reviewing reports. 3 months later, Marcus arrived home to find the kitchen once again filled with movement and laughter. But this time, he didn't stop in the doorway as an observer. Emma spotted him first and signed a greeting that he actually understood. Daddy's home. Come dance with us. The music was louder now, the bass deliberately amplified, so everyone could feel it through the floor and countertops. Maria had taught him that their weekly kitchen dance sessions weren't just about movement. They were about family communication, cultural celebration, and the simple joy of shared experience. As Marcus joined the dance, he marveled at how much had changed. Emma had begun creating her own choreographed pieces that told stories about her dreams and feelings. Ethan had discovered he could hear certain frequencies through bone conduction and was experimenting with instruments that created vibrations. Maria had enrolled in a master's program in deaf education, funded by Marcus, and was developing innovative curricula that she planned to share with other families. But perhaps the most significant change was in Marcus himself. The man who had once measured success in quarterly profits and stock prices now marked achievements in sign language vocabulary acquired, in conversations with his children that went deeper than "how was school," and in moments like these when his family moved together in perfect, soundless harmony. As the song ended and they all collapsed in a pile of laughter on the kitchen floor, Emma signed something that Maria translated with tears in her eyes. She says this feels like what home should feel like, where everyone belongs and everyone can understand each other. Marcus pulled his children close, finally understanding that the most important business deal he had ever made was the decision to stop being a spectator in his own family's life and start learning how to truly dance with the people he loved most.